Lately, I've been getting a lot of messages, comments, and emails from people asking the same question. Can the US government really take away someone's citizenship after they've already become a citizen? And the reason this question keeps coming up is because of a new bill that was recently introduced in Congress called the Fraud Accountability Act. If you're a naturalized US citizen or even a permanent resident hoping to become one someday, this is something you've probably seen discussed online, and honestly, it sounds scary at first. So in this video, I want to explain what this bill is actually proposing, why it's raising so many concerns, and whether this is something people need to panic about right now. The Fraud Accountability Act was introduced in both the House and the Senate, largely as a reaction to a recent daycare fraud scandal that made headlines. On the surface, the bill is presented as a way to crack down on fraud and hold people accountable. That sounds reasonable. But when you look closely at the language of the bill, a large part of it is focused not just on criminal punishment, but on immigration consequences. And that's where things get controversial, especially when it comes to denaturalization. Right now, denaturalization is very limited. A person can lose their U.S. citizenship only if it turns out they never should have received it in the first place. For example, if they lied during the naturalization process or committed fraud to obtain citizenship. In other words, the problem has to be connected to how they became a citizen. If a naturalized citizen commits a crime after becoming a U.S. citizen, that crime is handled in criminal court just like it would be for any other American. Citizenship itself is not taken away as punishment. The Fraud Accountability Act would change that in a very big way. Under this bill, a naturalized U.S. citizen could be denaturalized for fraud committed after they already became a citizen. That means citizenship would no longer just be about whether you obtained it legally. It would become something you could lose later as a form of punishment. That's a major shift in how citizenship has been treated in the United States. Another important part of this bill is how denaturalization would happen. Currently, denaturalization cases are handled in civil court, separate from criminal proceedings. Under this bill, that process would be removed. Instead, if someone is convicted of fraud in criminal court, that same court would also handle denaturalization. And here's the part that really worries a lot of people. The language of the bill says the judge shall denaturalize the person. That means the judge wouldn't have a choice. No discretion, no consideration of personal circumstances, no weighing how serious or minor the offense was. A fraud conviction would automatically trigger the loss of citizenship. The bill also expands what counts as fraud in a very broad way. Right now, for fraud to have serious immigration consequences, it usually has to involve at least $10,000. This bill removes that threshold entirely. Under the proposed law, any fraud, regardless of the amount, could qualify. That means even relatively small or nonviolent fraud offenses could carry life-changing immigration consequences. This doesn't just affect citizens. Permanent residents could also be impacted. Under the bill, permanent residents could become deportable for any fraud conviction, not just large-scale or serious cases. And for naturalized citizens, any fraud conviction could lead to mandatory denaturalization. Meanwhile, natural-born U.S. citizens would not face these consequences at all. Their citizenship could never be taken away, no matter the amount of fraud involved. That leads to one of the biggest legal and constitutional concerns with this bill. It effectively creates two classes of U.S. citizens. On one side, you have natural-born citizens whose citizenship is permanent and untouchable. On the other side, you have naturalized citizens whose citizenship becomes conditional and potentially reversible. Historically, U.S. law has not allowed this kind of distinction, and that's why many legal experts believe this bill would face serious constitutional challenges. There's also the issue of retroactivity. The bill would apply to fraud convictions going all the way back to September 30th, 1996. That's nearly 30 years. So someone who was convicted of fraud decades ago, served their sentence, rebuilt their life, and has been a law-abiding citizen ever since, could suddenly face deportation or denaturalization if this bill became law. That retroactive reach is another reason the proposal is so controversial. Now, it's really important to pause here and clarify something. This bill is not law. it has been introduced. But many bills are introduced in Congress every year and never go anywhere. Right now, it's still in committee and very far from being passed. Often, bills like this are reactions to public scandals, where lawmakers want to show voters that they're being tough on crime. That doesn't mean the bill will survive the legislative process or become enforceable law. Even if it did pass, there are major legal obstacles. Supreme Court decisions going back decades have held that Congress cannot take away U.S. citizenship unless a person voluntarily gives it up. Other rulings have made it clear that naturalized citizens have the same rights as natural-born citizens under the Constitution. Because of those precedents, many experts believe this bill would be challenged immediately and would have a hard time surviving in court. Still, the bill raises an important and troubling issue. It reflects a growing trend where denaturalization is being discussed more and more like deportation. Deportation has always applied to non-citizens. Citizenship, once granted, was supposed to be permanent. Turning denaturalization into a punishment blurs that line and creates fear and uncertainty for millions of naturalized Americans. So the bottom line is this: the Fraud Accountability Act is a proposal that contains some very aggressive and controversial ideas about denaturalization. It is not law, and it is far from becoming law. While it's understandable to feel anxious when reading headlines about it, there is no immediate threat. At the same time, it's important to stay informed because these conversations tell us a lot about where immigration policy debates may be headed in the future. If you have questions about this bill, or if you'd like me to break down similar immigration topics in plain, easy-to-understand language, feel free to leave a comment below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.